There is a regularly rehashed legend that we stroll past 3 sequential executioners during our lifetime without knowing. A startling idea, yet it's far-fetched you will ever meet a sequential executioner yourself. There is no denying that they are an uncommon variety, as the FBI presently says that sequential executioners represent less than 1% of killings. However, for these following people, they had the chance to meet a sequential executioner and later uncover precisely what that experience was like. These first individual records are all, in their own words, a perspective on a dull reality where they met with the absolute, generally infamous and heartless executioners on the planet, and lived to tell the story. Myra Hindley is viewed as perhaps the evilest lady who at any point lived close by her accomplice Ian Brady. The contorted pair slaughtered 5 kids matured somewhere in the range of 10 and 17 between July 1963 and October 1965. Police had the option to find the shallow graves of 3 casualties at Saddleworth Moor in northwest England. Be that as it may, Hindley never uncovered where one of different casualties was covered. The beast herself denied the lamenting families the privilege to an appropriate funeral. Journalist Yvonne Roberts met with Hindley when she was in a correctional facility at Cookham Wood Prison in Kent. At the point when Roberts asked Hindley how she might grab and torment a 10-year-old youngster, the kid executioner snapped back, "The young lady shouldn't have been out around then of night." Robert composes of her short time with Hindley: no sympathy, no empathy, a cut of reason totally absent. She resembles a good old phone switchboard where the wires are there, however, all in an inappropriate spot. In 1987, Sean Penn was detained at LA County Prison simultaneously as sequential executioner Richard "the Night Stalker" Ramirez. Penn, who was hitched to Madonna at that point, was serving a concise stretch for parole infringement, though Ramirez was condemned to pass on in California's gas chamber subsequent to being seen as blameworthy of 13 tallies of murder. Clearly energized by the news, there was a Hollywood A-lister only a couple of cells down. Ramirez sent Penn a note through one of the jail watches. Penn uncovered the note, read, "Hey, Sean, remain intense and hit them once more, Richard Ramirez. 666" with a pentagram and a version of the devil. Penn at that point composed back, "You know, Richard, it's difficult to be imprisoned and not feel a specific connection with your individual detainees. All things considered, Richard, I've done the inconceivable. I feel definitely no family relationship with you. What's more, I trust gas drops upon you before mental stability does, you know? It would be a kinder way out." It is basic information that sequential executioner Ted Bundy cherished a chance to be met by any individual who might tune in. From conversing with writers to FBI profilers and even a minister, Bundy would keep on arguing his honesty while waiting for capital punishment for killing 30 young ladies, a considerable lot of whom he likewise executed. Journalists at that point convinced Bundy to talk as an outsider looking in about a theoretical sequential executioner so he could relate his own wrongdoings without conceding guilt. When FBI agent Bill Hagmaier met Bundy, he was from the outset frightened by his over-cordiality. He stated, "Ted Bundy called me his closest companion. Here you have a person giving you a warm handshake, and you're thinking, this is a similar hand that held a hacksaw while he removed a little youngster's head." Then Bundy revealed to him facts about his wrongdoing that have never been rehashed, as they are excessively upsetting to ever be rehashed. Hagmaier reviewed, "Bundy revealed to me a few things which I will never rehash, keeping in mind the casualties' families. I'll simply state that he did a few things to the bodies that were similarly as unpleasant as they might be. Small time who can view himself as fortunate to in any case be alive is Bobby Lee Copus, who got sequential executioner Aileen Wuornos in 1990 and lived to tell the story. Copus was driving his vehicle along I-4 to Orlando when Wuornos requested a ride. She created a story that her 2 kids required getting from the childcare center in the vehicle. Wuornos started to express her rates for sexual administrations, yet a joyfully wedded Copus declined the offer. Talking at Wuornos' later preliminary for killing 7 men, Copus uncovered how the merciless executioner's character exchanged when he dismissed her advances. He stated, "When she propositioned me for the 3rd time, she wasn't a similar individual. She opened her handbag. I'd seen what I thought was a little bore gun in her tote. Now, I was truly frightened. I simply needed her out of my vehicle within the sight of many individuals." He pulled over at a truck stop, and when she got out the vehicle, he dashed away and heard her shouting, "I'll get you. I'll slaughter you as I did the other fat bastards." Dennis Rader played a lethal round of feline and mouse with investigators for 3 long decades. Somewhere in the range of 1974 and 1991, he slaughtered 10 individuals in Wichita, Kansas. At that point, sent subtleties of his violations to the press and police. After a long break from sequential executing, he re-emerged and continued sending letters in 2004, which in the end prompted his capture 1 year later. Lieutenant Ken Landwehr was the leader of the team attempting to get the BTK killer, short for tie, torture, kill. Rader sent a floppy plate to the police itemizing his wrongdoings, as he was told it couldn't be followed back to him. Following his capture, Rader couldn't accept the police finished the chase and had gotten him. Landwehr reviews, "He was unable to get over the way that I would mislead him. He could hardly imagine how I didn't need this to go on for eternity." Significantly more forebodingly, when he was offered a beverage during the cross-examination, Rader requested the name composed on the cup to be BTK. Joseph DeAngelo threatened California during the 1970s and 80s as the brilliant state killer. DeAngelo was systematic in his violations. He tied up his casualties and would regularly calmly arrest but to drink or fix himself something to eat. He submitted 13 homicides, assaulted in excess of 50 casualties, and burgled more than 100 homes. Yet figured out how to keep away from catch until 2018. During his cross-examination, DeAngelo still showed his capacity as a determined sequential executioner. Resigned specialist Paul Holes, who was taking a shot at the Golden State Killer case at that point, uncovered, once DeAngelo was put in that meeting room, he was in a stance that he didn't move from for longer than 60 minutes. He was completely unmoving. He did a slight development and were similar to, "He's moving." And then he would stop and freeze. "I've never met any individual who's had the option to be so unmoving for so long," adding, one of the female analysts stated, "That is the thing that he was doing once upon a time." She was correct. This was a person who had the physical capacity to go into someone's lawn, be in the shadows, and simply go completely still for a considerable length of time while he's watching what's happening inside the house. Simply observing that. Despite the fact that he's a more established man, you see this intrinsic capacity. The individuals who have known about Edmund Kemper will know he is one of the most unnerving sequential executioners ever. Standing 6 feet 9 inches tall and weighing 300 pounds, his casualties had minimal possibility of getting away from their unfortunate destiny in his grasp. As a young person, he was sent to live with his fatherly grandparents on a remote ranch where he immediately got exhausted. Kemper shot and killed the 2 his grandparents, and following his capture, he told analysts, I just thought about how it would feel to shoot Grandma, sent to Atascadero State Hospital. One of the most upsetting statements was from a specialist who Kemper had figured out how to control during his time in the clinic. Prior to his discharge, the clinician expressed, "If I somehow happened to see this patient without having any history accessible, I would imagine that we're managing a very balanced youngster who was liberated from any mental diseases. It is my sentiment that he has made a magnificent reaction to the long stretches of treatment and recovery, and I would see no mental motivation to believe him to be of any risk to himself or to any individual from society." Kemper left the medical clinic and he later proceeded to kill 6 youthful females, his own mom, and her companion. Dr. Harold Shipman is viewed as one of the most productive sequential executioners ever. His all-out casualty tally is accepted to be around 250, which earned him the epithet "Holy Messenger of Death." The same number of his patients were cheerful and solid until he paid them a visit. Shipman's work associates recollect how much time he spent caring for his patients and in any event, going well beyond what was anticipated from a specialist. However, at this point we have a lot darker viewpoint of his wrongdoings. His apparently pleasant signals are somewhat pitiless on reflection. Dr. Jeremy Dirks told a later hearing, "He seemed to be mindful and would go past the call of most doctors' obligation. All the time we heard accounts of what he was doing that all of us wouldn't fantasy about doing. He used to bring in on an old crippled patient on his route home after work and would wheel him round the square in his wheelchair." In 2004, Shipman ended it all by balancing himself in his phone at Wakefield Prison. In 1994, sequential executioner and barbarian Jeffrey Dahmer was left unaided with his kindred prisoner Christopher Scarver in the showers of the jail exercise center. Right around 20 minutes after the fact, Dahmer was found on the floor. His head and face had been seriously clubbed with a 20-inch metal bar. He was articulated dead at the clinic, and Scarver conceded his full blame. He had killed one of the most infamous sequential enemies of all time. Scarver later uncovered he killed Dahmer on the grounds that he had become repelled by his conduct in jail. In the jail bottle, Dahmer would play with his food until it looked like cut-off appendages. Scarver reviewed, he'd sprinkle on bundles of ketchup as blood. He would place them in places where individuals would be, remembering the minutes prior to the homicide. Scarver proceeded, "I inquired as to whether he did those things 'cause I was furiously sickened. He was stunned. Indeed, he was. He began searching for the entryway, quite snappy. I blocked him. He wound up dead. I put his head down. Law graduate Jason Moss figured out how to talk with a portion of the world's most infamous sequential executioners, including John Wayne Gacy, the sequential executioner, whose twofold conscience as Pogo the Clown turned into the essence of dread, reacted well to Moss and his excitement. At the point when the day of the eye-to-eye meet came, it at long last sank in rapidly for Moss that he was in the grasps of an ace manipulator. During his time in the Slammer, Gacy had figured out how to persuade the gatekeepers he was a model detainee, so he was permitted extraordinary benefits, for example, organizing his time with Moss to be totally alone. In his book The Last Victim, a true-life journey into the mind of the serial killer, Moss composes Gacy appeared to have masterminded the room as indicated by his accurate particulars. The space was little, even claustrophobic, and he'd put 2 seats one next to the other so it would be unthinkable for me to put myself past his grasp, adding, as I wrapped up my direction, "The other thing I really wanted to see was that we were situated out of the scope of the camcorder that should screen our discussion." Tragically, in 2006, Moss ended his own life at 31 years old.